Welcome back to this channel. As you can see on the screen, the image of the Somnath temple. So it's quite clear that we are going to model this Somnath temple. So let's start. So here you can see this temple is having a lot of tiny details. So which we are going to model this. So you can clearly see it is having a lot of details. So we will start the modeling from the top of the temple, and in order to model this, so here I am going to add a cube. So press shift A and add a cube. So now I am placing this cube at the top of the temple, and let's turn on the X-ray. Also scale this reference image, and now again place this, selecting the cube and then placing it at the top of the temple. Now in the edit mode, add a couple of loop cuts, one vertical and one on the horizontal like this. So now we are going to delete the four of the quadrants. You can see I have selected this four vertices, I mean the five vertices actually, and delete them, and we are going to add a mirror modifier. So here I am adding a mirror modifier and turn on both X and Y axis, and also turn on the clipping option, so that we need to only model along the one side of the temple and rest three side will be automatically modeled. So move back this reference image, and again into the edit mode of the cube, selecting the face selection. First scale it down right over here. Now scale this down. What you need to do is to match the reference. Now I am adding a couple of loop cuts and will try to scale down those things and try to match the reference. But before that, I have added the subdivision surface modifier, so that the object will become smoother and it will be subdivided a couple of times. So now the process is very simple. Keep on adding loop cuts and try to match the reference. It doesn't matter if you sometimes change the modeling of your model. It may or may not be perfect, but it should look good. So I think this is a simple process, and I need to fast forward this process so as to not to make the video larger enough. So once you complete adding the loop cuts, select the bottom of the part of the cube and move it like this. And now keep on extruding this loop and try to match the reference image. So here you can see I am extruding it. So now you can see this model is having an improper scale along the y-axis, which is not required, so scale down it along the y-axis. Again, as soon as I scale down this along the y-axis, you can see that the top part of the temple is not properly scaled along the y-axis and it is uneven. So what we can do is we can manually select those top of the loops. So turn on the X-ray and select those regions. And now what we can do is we can manually scale down it along the y-axis. So we need to do this same process with the rest of the, rest of the layers of the topmost part. So here I have selected this particular loop, and what we can do is we can move it along the y-axis. And now shade it smooth. And now if you see on the this object, it is looking perfect. Now I am selecting this lowermost part and we need to delete this center vertices. And now we can select this lower loop and we need to extrude that region and follow the reference. Following the reference is very important, as it is the main thing which will guide you to model your model properly. So always keep on following your reference until and unless you feel you need to change something, then you are free to change those things. So here again it is the very simple process of extruding the region and matching it with the reference. So again I am fast forwarding this process. Now you can see over here that I have skipped some of the process of modeling the details of this temple, which you can see on the edge of that particular topmost part. But I will show you how to model it, those details, later on. First of all, just try to model out the simple surfaces. Later on I will tell you how you can add those details. So here you can see I have just simply model out those simple edges, and now it's a time to add those details. So what we can do over here is I am adding a couple of loop cuts. So using Ctrl R command, you can add as many as loop cuts as you want, but for the sake of simplicity I am adding 4 loop cuts, you can see over here, and do the same thing over on this side also. Add 4 number of loop cuts, and in this way we are going to add those details. So now, using the face selection mode, select each of these alternate faces and now what we can do is going to this extrude region tool and select this extrude along normal tool, which will help you in extruding along the normal. On selecting that tool, now press E on the keyboard and extrude it along the normal. And now you can use this yellow tool and just try to move it along the backward direction so that the cavity of that region will become, and in this way we have modeled those inner areas, the detailed areas. Then again we can apply that same process at this topmost part, though it is not in the reference, but you can always change whatever looks good. So here I am selecting this region, and on the both of the sides you can select, and using that same extrude along the normal region tool, and you can see using E command you can create this amazing pattern. Similarly, you can do those kind of things whatever you like on each of these surfaces, though that things are not present in the reference, but you can do it actually. Now what we can do is again into the edit mode, selecting this lowermost loop and extrude it along the Z axis, but just try to match it with the reference. So once extruded, now you can add a couple of loop cuts. So here I am adding up to 10 loop cuts. I think it would be good, but let's increase the number of loop cuts. So here you can see this is not scaled properly along the y-axis, so I am just manually scaling it using the proportional editing tool. So now you can see it is properly scaled along both x and y axis. And if you see certain remaining empty regions, you can manually add those loop cuts. And again, if those things are not smooth around the edges, you can go to the sculpt mode and try to smooth out those regions. So here I have just smoothed out those regions, and I am just creating this loop by using the Control R command and just moving it along the inner region, so that there will be this kind of pattern. Again, do that same thing over this region. Select this loop, press Ctrl B to bevel it, and now select only one loop and move it into the inner region, just like this, so that there will be this creased kind of pattern. So once you have modeled this region, you can definitely do this same kind of process with the other loops. First of all, the beveling process, and then moving the only one loop into the inner region. Follow the same kind of process along this another region also. So now after completing this process, you can select the lowermost loop and again extrude it along the Z axis. So here you can see those vertices are not labeled along their particular axis. So I have just labeled them along those axes. And now again extruding this lowermost loop along the Z direction. At this point I am not going to model the details, but just try to model the basic shape of the temple, which you can see over here. We have modeled those basic shapes, and which is the most important part. Don't try to model the detail first. Let us just try to sketch out those simple basic details, and later on we are going to add those details part. So now just duplicate this particular object and go to the edit mode of this duplicated object and just delete the lowermost portion. And what we can do is we can just move those lowermost vertices into the z direction and just scale it down like this. Now scale down this particular object and just change the origin to the center. So now you can see I am just adding those, what you can say, the small structures which you can see on the temple. Just move this lowermost region a bit downward, and I think we need to just place it right over here. And what we can do is we can rotate it, but before that, if this kind of errors are occurring in your model, then just delete those faces, and what we can do is we can manually fill this region again. So just fill it, and so now duplicate that particular object and scale it downward and place it at in front of that object. We need to do this as many as time as it is given in the reference. So again, one more time, we can duplicate it and placing it at this front. As you can see over here, that front object, that kind of pattern is having some kind of changes. So we can apply those changes. So here you can see I'm just trying to modify those regions as per our requirement. Again, you can follow the same process of duplicating and scaling it as per the reference given. So I'm just doing that process only. So now what we can do is we can use the mirror modifier to this object and select your target object, and you can see it is mirrored on this region. And what we can do is we can apply this mirror modifier, I mean add this mirror modifier to each of these tiny objects, and that will automatically mirror those regions on the other side. So again here you can see, if you turn on the axis to y also, then it is also going to mirror it along the y axis, I mean along the back side of the temple. So here you can see this has been mirrored along both each of these sides. However, this kind of mirroring process will definitely increase the computing power and memory of this file. So in order to save your memory and computing power, we can hide those things into the viewport, so that our viewport will be much faster. And so here you can see the computer is lagging, and which we don't want. So once you mirror each of these object, you can definitely hide those things. And I think you can do this properly. So this is too much for this video, and we will model this kind of, I mean this process into the next video. So till then, have a nice day. We will meet in the next video.